Hello, hello. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IAS. This is Sham Kagud here. Before I start the discussion, if there is no issue with the sound, can you please give me a thumbs up? Okay, how are you all? How is your preparation going on? Are you people reading newspapers or not, etc.? Let me know. Right, so I hope you are reading well. That's the most important thing. Right, so I hope you're preparing well. You are revising what we have discussed in the last, let's say, 1 month, of course, on the weekdays. And I hope you are reading newspapers every day. For example, today's newspaper, the Hindu newspaper, if you have read, I would recommend that you people read. There is an article on open market sale scheme, OMS, open market sale scheme. Right, we have discussed the concept of OMS in the classroom as well. Right, under that, basically, the Food Corporation of India, which is the authority set up by the government of India, will auction off certain agriculture commodities. Very simple idea. Okay, do not complicate it. The Food Corporation of India will auction certain crops in the market, basically in order to control inflation. That's it. Right? What kind of crops are covered? Mainly, it is the idea of rice as well as wheat, or paddy and wheat. In fact, if you read in Hindu, only that much information is given. If you read Indian Express, today's Indian Express, the Food Corporation of India's chairman has announced that they will be auctioning off rice as well as wheat. Right? I would recommend that you people also read that article. Right? The FCI chairman has stated that they will auction wheat as well as rice now. Right? Certain amount of rice plus wheat. Right? That is basically 5 lakh million metric tons and 4 lakh metric tons. That will be basically be auctioned off in the market in the coming days. Again, order to cool inflation. In addition to that information, there is one more very important information that has been provided. That is, Government of India has imposed the tariffs on wheat. Now, I'll write a statement. Let me know whether this makes sense to you or not. One of the ways, one of the ways to control inflation in India is to reduce tariffs on agriculture commodities. Yes or no? I'll repeat the statement again just for your benefit. One of the ways to reduce or cool inflation in India is to reduce the import tariffs. To reduce import tariffs on agriculture imports. For example, on wheat, whenever wheat is imported in India, on wheat, we impose an import tariff around 40%. If government of India reduces the import tariff, let's say from 40% to 20% to 10%, or let's say to 5%, can it help us in reducing the inflationary trend in the market, that is in the domestic market? Again, the answer is yes. So again, please understand, UPC can twist all of this and they can ask you a question in a different way. For example, they can ask you, what of the following measures can be undertaken by the government to reduce right the inflation in the domestic market? One way will be to reduce import tariff. Another way will be to increase export tariff. Is it okay? Another way to control inflation in the domestic market will be to increase, not reduce, increase tariffs on exports. Yes or no? Another way will be to increase the tariffs on exports. Another way will be what? To impose stock limits, which they are doing now. Yes or no? In case of these agriculture commodities, can you see in the newspaper, Government of India imposing stock limits? You're not allowed to hold more than this. You're not allowed to hold more than this, etc., etc. What is the objective? Simple. If government will impose the stock limits, you cannot store more, you'll have to supply more. And those who are asking how stock limits will help, my dear, you basically, it means you have already forgotten what we have discussed under inflation. It simply shows that you've already forgotten what you have discussed in inflation, right? So stock limits can also be imposed in order to ensure that hoarding will not happen. And if the hoarding will not happen, supply to the market will automatically increase. Done? Right? So again, this is how you need to read the newspapers. Right? Read newspapers, connect the dots, connect it to the static information that we have discussed so far. Done. So with this caveat, again, I would ask you people to read the newspapers more and more. This is my recommendation, has been always and will be always. Read more and more current affairs. One static source, one source more than sufficient. Okay, let's start. So basically, last time, if you remember, that is 8 days ago, 9 days ago, we discussed the concept of employment. Then we started with the idea of inclusive growth. Certain concepts are left out. Let's finish it off today. Now, what we have discussed in employment, what do you mean by employed? How do we classify? What is the definition of a person who is employed? If you remember, I had given you three characteristics or three features. One, basically, the person is willing to work. Second, the person will get a job in the market. And third, for the job or the services that the person is providing, will be paid salary. Very simple, right? So if a person will meet all the three characteristics, then we call the person as an employed person. What about unemployment? Who is unemployed? Person is willing to provide services, person is willing to work, but the market does not utilize the skill set. That is basically the definition of unemployed person. Then we discussed, why there is unemployment in India, what are the issues, why there is jobless growth in India. In order to address this particular issue of unemployment, underemployment, as well as the jobless growth, what reforms have been implemented by the government over a period of time, right? So that was covered under the concept of employment. Then we started with the concept of inclusive growth. And in between inclusive growth, that is in the half coverage of inclusive growth, we stopped the discussion. Now, let me basically revise what we have discussed in inclusive growth. Inclusive growth refers to the pace as well as the pattern of growth, where we are talking about both, that is, the growth that is taking place in the economy and ensuring that the benefits of the growth will reach to all the sections of the society. That's the whole idea of inclusive growth. Because if you remember the example I told you, imagine there are four people in the country. With the rise in the GDP, it also means incomes of the people are increasing. It's not just that you should have only higher GDP, higher production of goods and services. It's also equally important to ensure that, right, people, that is, let's say, quality or the standard of lifestyle will improve, the nutritional availability will improve, etc., etc. That's a basic idea of inclusive growth. In fact, if you remember, I also told you it's not just about even people. Right? You don't have to cover only people under the inclusive growth. What about environment? Right? What about farmers? What about employed population, etc., etc.? So it's a very very exhaustive coverage whenever you talk about inclusive growth. Then what are the features of inclusive growth? I hope remember this particular picture that I gave you. What are the features of inclusive growth? There should be development in agriculture sector, the farmer improvement in terms of incomes, real incomes, not just nominal incomes. The number of jobs which are created should also keep on increasing, right? The financial inclusion should also be promoted. The regional disparities, right, should be reduced. Income disparities, wealth disparities should be reduced. Poverty numbers should come down. We should also protect the environment, etc., etc. That is generally the meaning of the term inclusive growth. That is, in simple terms, whenever we say we want to achieve inclusive growth, what are we supposed to achieve then? I hope you understand, right? If you say, I want to achieve inclusive growth, right, how can you decide whether you're moving towards inclusive growth or not? For example, right, don't worry about rest of the factors. What if I say the number of poor people in Indian economy is continuously decreasing? Is it not a good sign? Let me know. If the number of poor people in India, absolute number, not percentages, the absolute number, if the number of poor people in the domestic market will start coming down, is it not a good indication for the Indian economy? That is good. With GDP increasing, we are ensuring that more and more people are getting more salary, more income, and that is resulting in the reduction of poverty. So that is basically the argument. Okay. Then why should India achieve inclusive growth? Because right, India has the second largest population, right? In fact, by majority of the sources, will become the largest population now. India is suffering from growth as well as development indicators. In fact, if you remember, I also gave you the difference between what is economic growth and economic development. Economic growth is a quantitative concept, very simple idea, do not complicate it. Economic growth is a quantitative concept. What do you mean by quantitative concept? It will simply talk about numbers, right? Indian GDP is a $3.7 trillion or $3.3 trillion, $5 trillion, etc., etc. But that does not mean whether the benefit of this growth is reaching the people. How can you find out whether the people are getting the benefit of the growth? Then look at the development indicators, right? What is happening to farmer suicides? What is happening to, right, let's say the nutritional levels? What is happening to number of people who are there in the poverty, right? That is a qualitative parameter. So focus on the quantity as well as quality of development and growth respectively. Done. So although there is a higher GDP growth rate that is being achieved, the benefits of that is not reaching to all the sections of the society. Very small number of people, they are getting more and more rich. Their wealth is increasing, their incomes are increasing. And that's the reason there is a concern that India may not be experiencing inclusive growth, rather it might be experiencing exclusive growth. So this is where we stop the discussion. In fact, if you remember, I had shown you this picture also. As per World Inequality Report, how much of the total income will go to female workforce in India, male workforce in India, the top 1% of the population, how much they earn, how much wealth they have, etc., etc. Done. So let me continue now. This is where we are supposed to start. Let me continue. What are the issues related to inclusive growth? What are the factors that you need to consider whenever you want to achieve inclusive growth? One is both growth and development, both can be achieved together. Do not try to delineate, do not try to divide both of them, do not try to focus on both of them individually. We have discussed this last time also. For example, I told you, if India can ensure that there is a skilled labor availability, point number one, have a look at this. If we can ensure that skilled labor is available, second, more and more investment will take place, let's say in the manufacturing sector, services sector, etc. Don't you think with the skilled labor availability, the demand for the labor with higher investment will increase, and more people will get the job, and more people getting the job simply means salaries which are going to the houses will increase. The number of people who will be there in poverty will also start moving out of poverty. So are we not achieving growth as well as a development together? Is it okay? Are we not achieving both of them together? We are not targeting them individually, and we don't have to do that. We will have to target both of them together, and we can achieve both of them together. That is the first very important issue. Second, number of poor must also be reduced both in percentage as well as absolute numbers. I'll explain to you. Please understand this carefully. If you look at the data in 1990s, generally you will come across a data saying that more than 45% of population in case of India was classified as poor. Very simple. Around 45 to 46% of the population was classified as poor back in 1990. And today, as per 2011 census data, 21.9% of the population is classified as poor. Now, please have a look at it in terms of percentage. In terms of percentage, no doubt poverty numbers have come down. Agreed? Any difficulty in this? In terms of percentage, that is how much percentage of the population is classified as poor, no doubt percentage has reduced. But does it also mean how many people are poor? It has come down. Let me know. Does it also indicate that how many people are classified as poor? It has come down. No. Does it indicate what is the intensity of the poverty in India? No. That is the meaning of the second statement. We will have to reduce the poverty. No doubt we'll have to reduce, eradicate poverty. But not just in terms of percentages, but also in absolute numbers. In absolute numbers. For example, if you take 21.9%, just translate it. I'll just simply round it off to 22%. Just round it off for sake of calculation. And what is the population in 2011? 1.21 billion or 121 crore people. Right? Again, this is as per 2011 census. I'm pretty sure all of you are reading newspaper. You know it is not 121 crore now. It is much, much higher than that. Just to do back of the hand calculation, you will realize that the number of people who can be classified as poor as per 2011 census was more than 26 crore people. Was more than 26 crore people. Out of 121 crore people, more than 26 crore people are classified as poor. Don't you think we will have to reduce the number of people who are classified as poor? And there is one more concern regarding this. Even if you reduce the number of poor people in India, how do you define poverty? I hope you understand. How do you define poverty? That is also very important. Let me give a very basic idea. Generally, whenever you talk about poverty in India, how do you classify whether a person is poor or not poor? Whether they belong to below poverty line or above poverty line. How do you classify that? It is generally done based on the expenditure. Is it okay? It is done based on expenditure. It is done based on the expenditure. That is, for example, I'll just throw certain arbitrary numbers. Again, don't buy heart from this. When social issues faculty will take up poverty in detail, they will tell you about it. As per various committees that have been set up, right, Lakkadwala committee, or for that matter, Rangarajan committee or Tandulkar committee, generally what they do is, they will give you certain number, right? They will give you certain amount of minimum expenditure. For example, let's say they will say that minimum expenditure has to be 32 rupees. Minimum expenditure has to be 32 rupees. If you can spend more than 32 rupees per day, then you'll be classified as above poverty line. And if you're able to spend, right, less than 32 because you don't have money, then you'll be classified as below poverty line. But don't you think, looking at the number 32 rupees, this number, that is 32 rupees, does not do justice to whether the person is poor or not poor? Now, what do you mean by doesn't do justice? Can you imagine a person living on day-to-day basis by spending 32 rupees? And do you think 32 rupees is sufficient for a person to take care of their day-to-day expenditures? I hope you understand my argument here. So if let's say hypothetically it is 32 rupees and government of India says the number of poor people in case of India has reduced, right? It might also happen that a large number of population which has moved out of poverty, they are able to spend just about 32 rupees, maybe let's say 40 rupees. Have a look at this. They're able to spend 40 rupees. Just because they're able to spend 8 rupees more than your cutoff, the threshold income, you will simply classify them as not poor. So don't you think that is also a faulty, the faulty concept to classify poor people as well as a non-poor people? So again, I hope you understand what I'm trying to convey here. Three very important points. One is, we will have to reduce poverty. In terms of what? One, in terms of percentage of total population. Second, in absolute numbers. And third, you'll also have to focus on how do you define poverty. How do you define poverty? Do you define based on the per capita, do you define based on what is there, right, per day expenditure, right? Will it include all the expenditures on food as well as non-food, etc., etc.? That is also needs to be looked at. Done. So this is the second concern, second issue related to inclusive growth. Third one, the benefits of the reforms have not reached to all the sections of the society. That is pretty much evident when you look at various surveys. For example, if you remember the World Inequality Report, the report simply says that the top 1% of India's population accounts for around 22% of the total income and around 33% of the total wealth. Right? Don't you think it simply indicates that, right? This is a fact to prove that the growth in case of India has not benefited majorly to the poor population, but has given major benefit to the rich population. And please do let me know, is it not one of the outcomes of capitalism? Let me know, is it not one of the outcomes of capitalism? Right? Please go back to the first class, the very first class. Right? Don't say it is right. It may indicate, no. Right? Some of you are saying maybe, right? It's a feature of a capitalism. No, it is a feature of a capitalism. One of the features of the capitalism is that rich people, businessmen, will make an investment, and because they're making an investment, automatically the profits will be taken away by all these rich people, which indicates that there is a wealth gap there is an income gap in the society. Right? So it is one of the features of a capitalism that is being shown in case of Indian economy. Okay. Social infrastructure development has been neglected over a period of time. Again, I've written has been neglected. I've not written it is neglected, right? In the past, right, post independence, so much of, let's say, focus was not made on the social infrastructure. For example, the rural infrastructure. You might talk about micro enterprises in a rural India, right? Let's say the farmers in a rural India, or road connectivity in a rural India, education infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure in rural India, or even for that matter, sanitation infrastructure. But having said so, can you say now, in the last 2 decades, or let's say in the last 15, 20 years, social infrastructure in rural India is neglected? No. Right? Many of these infrastructure projects have been targeted specifically in rural India. For example, sanitation infrastructure, road infrastructure. Can I give you certain examples here? Pradhana Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Have you heard of this? Pradhana Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. Right? What about Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, etc. So we are developing now. We cannot simply say we are neglecting it. We are focused. We are developing rural infrastructure. Okay. We need to promote investment in the technology, that is research and development, that will improve the quality or the standard of life of the people. Again and again, I've been telling you this. We need to make a lot of investment in the research and development, because we are heavily dependent on the import of the technology. Rather than importing technology and giving patents, or the patents which are, right, owned by the foreign companies, which will basically drain away the profits, why don't we invest more and more in, let's say, research and development in technology related to agriculture sector, in technology related to, let's say, healthcare sector, in technology related to transportation sector, etc., etc. That will improve the technology availability in the domestic market, right? Indian companies will be benefiting, Indian people, Indian farmers will be benefiting. Can I give you the example in the current affairs, right, which appeared in the Mint newspaper yesterday? If somebody has read it, it's very good. For example, IFCO, do you remember the company's name? Let me know. Do you remember the company's name? IFCO. IFCO is associated with that. IFCO is associated with fertilizer, right? It's a fertilizer cooperative. IFCO has signed an agreement with a USA company now. IFCO has signed an agreement with a USA company. This was there in yesterday's newspaper. Will be exporting the nano urea, which is our technology. Nano urea has been developed in India. Will be exporting nano urea to the USA now. So please look at the situation, right? Until very, very recently, we were heavily dependent on imports of fertilizers. Now we are basically promoting exports of fertilizers. And Government of India has clearly stated, in the next couple of years, we want to reduce import dependence. We want to completely reduce the import dependence on fertilizers, right? So that is the argument. We need to invest in technology, that is research and development, so that, right, automatically the technology that is available in India, the standard of living, the quality of living, right, etc., will improve in the domestic market. So these are some of the issues related to inclusive growth. Okay. Next, so what reforms have been undertaken by the government in order to promote the idea of inclusive growth? Now this is just an illustration. Can you understand the term illustration? This is just an illustration to prove that, okay, in all the areas, Government of India has taken certain reforms to promote idea or the concept of inclusive growth. For example, you talk about employment, right? Whenever you talk about inclusive growth, features of inclusive growth, you talk about employment. Has Government of India taken any initiative to promote employment? Of course, yes. What about Startup India? What about PLI, production linked incentives? What about Make in India, etc.? Right. So, in terms of promotion of employment, of course, yes. Right. In terms of, let's say, promotion of industries, again, you can give the same. In terms of skilling, in terms of providing the skilling to the people, right, ensuring they will be absorbed in the market. Skill India initiative, Pradhana Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, PMKVY 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 have been implemented by the government in order to reduce poverty. In order to reduce poverty in case of India, Government of India is providing, let's say, Manrega, 100 days of wage opportunities for every adult. I'm sorry, not every adult, at least one adult in every household in the rural market. What about schemes? Right, let's say Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, National Food Security Act, Annapurna scheme, etc., etc. Again, you can give hundreds of examples. Hundreds of examples. Right? I hope you understand my point here. You can give hundreds of examples. I'm just giving you an illustration of it. It is not exhaustive. It is just an illustrative list. What about financial inclusion? To promote financial inclusion, we have Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, Atal Pension Yojana, banking correspondence. Right. By the way, in Business Line, couple of days ago, there is an article on banking correspondent, Bank Sati. Did we discuss the concept of Bank Sati? Please do let me know. Did we discuss the idea of a banking correspondent or a bank sati? I'm pretty sure I've discussed it under the concept of banking. Right. So a couple of days ago in Business Line, you can check it online later. In Business Line, there is an article on bank sati. Please have a look at it. Okay. So financial inclusion, Atal Pension Yojana, right? The Pradhana Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Yojana, Pradhana Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, Pradhana Mantri Janadhan Yojana, Bank Sati, etc., etc. All these things we have discussed, which will be used by the government to promote the idea of a financial inclusion. Okay. Then, in order to protect environment, right? Of course, in ecology and environment classes, you will read about it. But is it okay? FAME 1 initiative, FAME 2 initiative, yes or no? FAME 1, FAME 2. And in the last 4 to 5 weeks, we have discussed so much about, right? Here and there, I've kept on telling you, please read, please read. This is the important article, please read. FAME 1, FAME 2. What about the railway? What about railways? In case of railways, we want to make railways the carbon neutral by 2030. That is also there in the newspaper. The whole Indian economy we want to make, that is, India will become a net neutral, I'm sorry, net zero emission by 2070, right? Etc. etc. There are so many renewable energies, solar energy, wind energy. Can I write all of them as a reform to basically protect environment? Answer is simply yes. What about rural development? Right, you can write hundreds of schemes under rural development. Right, you can quote example of BharatNet initiative, where government of India says all the village panchayats will be connected by high speed broadband connectivity. All these panchayats will be connected by high speed broadband connectivity. Now some of you will be thinking, sir, how broadband connectivity will promote rural development? It's a very simple idea. If there is a high speed broadband connectivity, don't you think the farmers can get very good amount of information in order to cultivate crops? Will it not help in a healthcare sector? Will it not help people in getting access to certain services from the government? Right, etc., etc. Even it will promote education, right? It will promote social security, etc. So high speed broadband connectivity will also promote rural development. The government also has implemented a concept of aspirational districts. Around 115 plus districts have been identified from all the states in India. The argument is very simple. We have identified certain parameters, such as, let's say, the education, right? Such as water availability, water resources availability, etc. And we want to ensure that under all these parameters, the infrastructure will be made available in all these 115 plus districts. And this is the reason why this is called as a aspirational districts program. And Niti Aayog is basically monitoring the implementation of aspirational districts program. So these are again some of the schemes. Some of the schemes. I'm not saying all the schemes, some of the schemes. Right? You can write many more. And again, please understand, many of these schemes can be categorized under multiple components. Don't say, sir, you have written Make in India, right, under the concept of industries. Is it just limited to industries? Of course, no. Can I write Make in India under industries? Yes. Under employment? Yes. Right? Under, right, let's say promotion or reduction of poverty? Again, the answer is yes. Because if employment is generated, automatically we expect poverty to come down. So again, please understand the argument here. Do not restrict yourself and by heart this, right, let's say the list or the mind map and say, right, only this will come under this. Absolutely no. If you apply the logic sense to that, if you apply the concept to that, you will realize, okay, this can be part of this, right, as well as under this, as well as under this initiative. Done? Right. So this is basically the idea of a inclusive growth. Can we go forward? Right. So these are the various aspects related to the concept of inclusive growth. Now I'll go to the next, the last concept for you people. That is the idea of a international monetary fund. Any issue so far? Please do let me know. Otherwise, I'll go forward. Aspirational districts point is not clear. Aspirational districts program is, under this, we have identified more than 100 districts throughout India. And what we want to do is, we have identified certain parameters. For example, water resources or education for that matter. And under these parameters, we want to ensure certain reforms will be implemented. The districts will show progress under the parameters. That is basically the idea of an aspirational districts program. How fiber optics will help agriculture? My dear, what if you want to get information regarding, let's say, what is the latest quality seeds available? Right? You want to get information regarding whether you have received, right, Pradhana Mantri Kisani Yojanas, right? The new announcement, anything is done. In fact, I'll give you a current affairs. Let me know whether you have read it or not. Yesterday's newspaper. Yesterday's newspaper, by the way. The PM Kisan app has been launched by the government. It was there in yesterday's Indian Express. PM Kisan app has been launched. Yes or no? Please check it later. And this is where current affairs will play so much of important role in your preparation. We have discussed PM Kisan. Right? Please do let me know. Did we discuss what are the components of PM Kisan? Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Under that, 6,000 rupees annually will be provided in the form of income support to the farmers. And this will be done in 3 installments, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. Every 4 months, these 3 installments will be paid. And this we discussed where? Under the concept of subsidies, under the discussion of direct benefit transfer, under the discussion of classification of subsidies into green box, amber box, etc. Now we have discussed all of this. On paper, the scheme looks very good. All of you will agree with me? On paper, the scheme will look good, very, very good. But don't you think there will be certain operational issues regarding the implementation of the scheme? For example, whenever a farmer wants to get access to the PM Kisan, right? Whenever they want to get access to PM Kisan, they will have to register. They will have to provide, right? Let's say their thumbprint. They will have to, right, basically go to a point where, let's say, go to a bank, go to this, get registered, etc. This, don't you think, will make it very difficult for very, very old farmers? Let me know. This will make it very, very difficult for the old farmers. And what about those people who are involved in physical labor, right? Where a lot of times their thumbprint will be damaged. Now, please tell me, is it an operational issue or not? In order to address that, please check the newspaper. Government of India now has launched PM Kisan app. And what is the beauty of the PM Kisan app now? The PM Kisan app will help you in registering through facial recognition. Right? Application of technology in agriculture sector. Right? Through PM Kisan app, you can register for the PM Kisan through facial recognition. Right? That was there in yesterday's newspaper. Please read. Please read. I hope you understand how internet connectivity will help in the agriculture sector now. Done? Okay. Can we go forward? So these are the various concepts that I wanted to discuss in the context of inclusive growth. Okay. The last concept that I want to discuss is the idea of International Monetary Fund. IMF, International Monetary Fund. Now, if you remember, we discussed one more international organization, World Trade Organization. Right? Was there a discussion regarding WTO yesterday? In today's Indian Express. In today's Indian Express, right? In fact, even in business line, there are articles and business standard as well between India, USA, and WTO. My recommendation is please do read that. Business Standard, there's an article on this. Indian Express, there's an article on this. That is, if you remember, that is the India and USA. There are these two countries are involved in a lot of disputes under WTO. That is, USA has filed multiple disputes against India at a WTO. That is at a dispute settlement body. And because of the recent trip that was undertaken by the Prime Minister of India to USA, US has agreed to drop 6 cases, to withdraw 6 cases of trade dispute which they have filed against India under WTO. Please read that. Please read that article. Very nice article, very important for you as well. So I'll repeat the point again. US has agreed to drop or to withdraw basically 6 cases that they filed against India at WTO, World Trade Organization. Right, so you will understand what is dispute settlement body, how do you connect it to current affairs, right? What do you mean by dispute, what is the advantage of these kind of trade relations, etc., etc. Done. Okay, now why did I raise the term WTO in this context? If you remember earlier when I was discussing about World Trade Organization, I told you back in 1940s the members, right, many members or many countries came together, and there was one conference called as Bretton Woods Conference. Bretton Woods Conference. Right? Bretton Woods is nothing but a city in USA. So in the Bretton Woods Conference, there was a discussion that we should set up 3 institutions in the international level. That is, all the member countries should come together. We should set up 3 institutions. One was to promote trade. That is basically the International Trade Organization, which was not set up. Instead of ITO, we had a temporary arrangement, GATT, which was subsumed under WTO from 1995. Second one was to basically promote growth and development, reconstruction of infrastructure. For that, we promoted, established a World Bank. And third one was basically to ensure there is no issue with exchange rates. There is no issue with, right, let's say currencies, etc., right, or BOP crisis. For that, we established International Monetary Fund. And if you remember, I told you ITO was not established. World Bank and IMF were the 2 organizations which were established. And these are also very famously referred to as Bretton Woods twins. Now, come to the point here. International Monetary Fund. Now, International Monetary Fund is basically, right, an international organization where 190 members are present. India is one of the founding members of IMF, and the headquarters of IMF is present in the Washington DC. Now, many of the books have given a very, very complicated structure of IMF. I'll come back to the functions, don't worry. I would recommend, please by heart this structure. Do not complicate it. Please simply by heart this structure. I've given a very simple structure of WTO, and I've given a very simple structure, even I will give a very simple structure of even IMF. Just to make my point much more clear, either now or after the class, go to Google and type IMF structure. Do that after the class. Go to the Google and type IMF structure, and you will see such a very complicated structure of IMF, so many arrow marks, so many, right, let's say branching, etc., etc. Is it required for UPSC? Answer is no. That structure is not at all required for UPSC. What is required is a very simplified structure, just like WTO. Under IMF, the highest decision making body, I repeat, the highest decision making body is the Board of Governors. Now, I'll ask you a very simple question. You tell me which is the highest decision making body under WTO. This is where your preparation, your revision will help you. Let me know now. I'm looking at your comments. Which is the highest decision making body of WTO, World Trade Organization? Do not search it. Do not open anything else. Please do let me know. Which is the highest decision making body of WTO? General Council. Some of the students are saying General Council. Wrong. Ministerial Conference. I've written that in the PPT. Please check it. The highest decision making body, or the authority which has the highest powers within the WTO, it is the ministerial conference. Why? You people are not revising why. It is a ministerial conference, right? In fact, I've told you ministerial conference is generally conducted once every 2 years. But in the last couple of years, no ministerial conference has happened because of the pandemic. Only in the last year, there is a ministerial conference. Again, so this is where you need to revise carefully, revise. Now, in the same way, in IMF, the highest decision making authority is board of governors. And board of governors, basically the member countries, there are two representatives. Okay, the member countries, there are two representatives. One is called as a governor, second one is called as an alternative governor. Now, when you come across the term governor and alternative governor, do not get confused with RBI, because in case of RBI, the chief, the head of RBI is called as a governor of RBI. Don't get confused. So in IMF, board of governors, right, the board of governors, the member countries will represent in two ways. That is, a governor will be appointed, as well as, right, the alternative governor will also be present. Now, from India, who is the governor, right? Who is the representation from India who will represent as a governor in the IMF? It is always the finance minister. Remember this. It is the finance minister who will represent India as a governor in the board of governors. In case of alternative governors, it is the RBI governor. Is it okay? It is the RBI governor who will represent India, right, as an alternative governor in case of board of governors. Now, what is the role of the board of governors? Right? Why do we say it is the highest decision-making authority? For example, let's say one country wants to join IMF. Who will take the decision? A country has to be removed from IMF. Who will decide that? Right? The admittance of the new members, withdrawal of the existing members, amendments to the articles of agreement. Articles of agreement basically means what are the founding principles of IMF. When 1940s, when these member countries came together, don't you think they will sign certain agreement to set up IMF? Let me know, right? I hope this point makes sense to you. The member countries will sign certain agreement saying that, okay, this will be the role of IMF. Now, somebody wants to change the role of IMF. Somebody wants to introduce a new function. They want to change the structure of IMF. They want to change something regarding IMF. Can they do it unilaterally? No, the board of governors have to approve it. So articles of agreement have to be changed. New members have to be admitted. Existing members have to be withdrawn. STRs have to be allocated. I'll come to STR, important for UPSC. I'll come to STR individually. Have patience. And quotas also have to be allocated. I'll discuss point number 1 and point number 2 separately. Please wait for some time. Right, so this is the function of board of governors, and that is the reason I said board of governors is the highest decision making authority. Now, second point is board of governors is always given advice. I repeat, the board of governors is always given the advice by two different committees. One is called as a International Monetary and Financial Committee, IMFC. There are 24 members in the IMFC. IMFC meets twice in a year. Now, who are the 24 members? These are the 24 members. Do you need to by heart the list of 24 members? Not required. What is important for you is India a member of it? Please have a look at it. Is India a member of it? Answer is yes. Right? Next year or whenever you're writing the exam, just update whether the membership has changed or not, whether India is a member or not. That's it. Beyond this, please do not sit. I'm not challenging you. I'm not at all challenging you. Do not sit every day morning and try to mug up or by heart this list of 24 members. UPSC will not ask you. Apart from this, there is also one more authority, the Development Committee. And there are 25 members in the Development Committee. This is a list of the 25 members. And again, India is a member. India is a part of the Development Committee as well. Right? And IMF as well as World Bank, these are generally present whenever there is a development committee meeting or IMFC meeting, because these are very important, right? I'm sorry, the IMF as well as World Bank, right? These will advise, that is a development committee will advise both IMF as well as World Bank, right? So that is basically the structure at the top of IMF. Now, the board of governors cannot keep on meeting to take care of day-to-day activities. I hope you understand. Board of governors, right? For example, finance minister. Do you think finance minister has so much of time every day to go to a meeting that is at least, let's say, virtual also? Every day to join a meeting and to discuss what should be done in case of IMF? Of course, no. Right? So, what about RBI governor? Do they have so much amount of time? Again, the answer is no. So, just like WTO, there is one more authority which has been set up, that is the executive board. And the board of governors, in order to ensure that the day-to-day activities of IMF, day-to-day decision making of IMF is done, they will delegate lot of the functions to the executive board. In the executive board, there are 24 members, and this executive board will take care of the daily business or the daily activities of IMF. For example, sir, what do you mean by daily activities of IMF? The board shall discuss all the aspects related to the IMF's work, such as the staff's annual health checkups, the member countries, right? Whether the member countries are doing correctly or not, right? What is the situation of this country, country X, country Y, India, China, right? Pakistan, Sri Lanka, what is happening in all these countries? Whether the policies of the countries, are they affecting exchange rates, right? Whether the government's policies are adversely or negating the impact of the central banker. Is any country following a restrictive, right? Let's say the policy regarding exchange rate, etc. All these functions will be undertaken by the executive board. Executive board. So one of the students says, sir, health checkup means what here? My dear, health checkup means whether these countries policies, right? We are evaluating the policies of the countries. I'll give a very simple example. If government of India undertakes a policy which will restrict exchange rate, don't you think that will come under the purview of IMF's function, IMF's, right? Let's say purview. I hope you understand this, right? Whether the policies that are being undertaken by the country or the central banker, are they having any restriction over exchange rate? Is it affecting their BOP position, etc., etc.? That is what this the executive board will actually conduct. And if you are reading the newspapers, very often these international authorities will keep on publishing reports. For example, IMF does it publish a report. Have a look at this. World Economic Outlook, Global Financial Stability Report, Fiscal Monitor, Regional Economic Outlook. All of these, from where do they get the research? Who will publish all of this? Do you think the finance minister has so much of time to discuss all these reports and come out with reports? Of course, no. Everything is done by the executive board itself. Okay. So this is basically the simplified structure of IMF. But please by heart this, but without by hearting this list of the countries. Do not by heart the list of the countries. Simply observe, yes, India is present in both of them. Okay, and generally you will see that international agencies will also be present in, right, these discussions which will take place by IMFC, Development Committee, etc. Now, what are the functions of IMF? What is the role of IMF? Point number one, it will provide loans to member countries. Anybody has a doubt in point number one? If you say you have a doubt in point number one, my dear, then you are not reading newspapers. Why? Haven't you read about IMF providing loans to Sri Lanka? IMF providing loans to Pakistan, right? Again, you don't have to read beyond Hindu also to understand this point, right? So very, very recently, that too very recently, right? In fact, in Pakistan now there's a concern that more loans will not be released by the IMF. And if the IMF doesn't release more of the loans to Pakistan, the crisis that is happening already, it is expected it will become spiral. That is, it will become much more intense. But again, don't worry about that. Argument is simple. It will provide loans to member countries. Right? Right now, they have given loans to Pakistan. They have given loans to Sri Lanka. Has India taken the loans in the recent past? Answer is simply no. Right? In the recent past, no, India has not taken the loan from IMF. The last time a loan arrangement, generally they call it as an arrangement. The last time the loan arrangement that was done between India and IMF was back in 1991. And remember what happened in 1991? Please do let me know. Do you remember what happened in 1991? Right? Sir, have you discussed it? If you ask me that question, I'll simply say, please go back to international trade. We have made a discussion on this. That is, in 1991, we were facing BOP crisis. Very simple. We were facing BOP crisis. And that is when we made an arrangement to take a loan from IMF. The loan arrangement was done from 1991 to 1993. But post that, no loans have been taken. And India has paid these loans back to the IMF. Very simple idea. It will monitor the policies of the governments. Of course, yes, they will have to monitor, because the policies of the government will not just affect the domestic market, will also affect the international market. It will not only affect trade, it will also affect exchange rate, etc. So that is a precise reason. They will also monitor the policies of the governments. It will also give recommendation to the member countries regarding policies. Yes, that is the whole idea of publishing these reports. Right? Can you see the list of the reports that I've given here? What is the whole idea of providing these reports, publishing these reports? They want to give recommendations to the member countries so that the policies can be amended, policies can be changed. Right? So these are the very important functions of the International Monetary Fund. Any difficulty? Can we go forward? Any difficulty? Now, 2 points are left out, the quota as well as the special drawing rights. Stability report. You don't have to understand, sir, what is given in this report, what is given in that report. Don't worry. Publication point. My dear, it's a very simple, straightforward point. IMF will publish all the reports. Simply by at it. Simply by at it. IMF will provide loans to, IMF will publish these reports. I've given some of the names of the reports. Simply by at it. IMF provide loans for non-member countries? Generally, no. IMF doesn't enter into the non-member countries. Okay. What is the benefit of IMF in recommending policies? They can make more interest on money. My dear, IMF as an international agency, it is not running behind profits. They need money. I'll tell you that now. They need money. But you talk about World Bank, you talk about IMF, or you talk about World Trade Organization, the main objective is to promote trade. Main objective is to promote stability in the countries. Main objective is to promote development, growth, etc. Their main objective is not running behind profits, because these are not commercial enterprises. If these are commercial enterprises, of course, yes, they will run behind profits. But do you think World Bank, the main objective of World Bank is to make profit? No. Do you think the main objective of, let's say United Nations for that matter, is it to run behind profits? No. Right? So that is the argument. Okay, done. Is it necessary that countries have to follow the recommendations? No, these are recommendations. These are recommendations. That's it. Okay, now I told you that IMF will provide loans. Done. IMF will provide loans. But don't you think if IMF wants to provide loans, they should get money in the first place? Because IMF doesn't print rupees. IMF doesn't print dollars, which means IMF should have money to provide loans in the first place. So from which sources IMF will get money, and what type of loans are provided by IMF? That will be the discussion now. Is it okay? I'll repeat it again. IMF has to provide loans. We have understood that. So from where the IMF will get the money, and in what way IMF will provide loans? Let's try and understand. Point number one, IMF will collect the money, get the money from member countries. And IMF will get the money in different ways. For example, there is a system called as quota system. I'll start with this, have patience. Then there is a multilateral borrowing. Then there is a bilateral borrowing agreement. Generally, what IMF has done is, every member country, whenever they join IMF, IMF will collect certain amount of money from them. Very simple. Whenever any country becomes a member of IMF, IMF will collect certain amount of money from these countries. For example, has India paid money to IMF to become a member? Answer is yes. Has USA contributed? Answer is yes, etc., etc. But now question is, this money that is collected, how it is decided? It is decided based on a system called as quota. It is decided based on a system called as quota. Now, what is this idea for quota? Right? Quota in simple terms is a building block of IMF. It represents, quota represents what is the relative position of a country in the global market. I'll repeat it. This is a definition that is given. I'll come to the calculation. Just give me some time. Follow this carefully. What is a quota? Quota is basically, let's say, what is the position of India in the international market. For example, as per the latest data that has been published by IMF, you can check it even in the IMF website. IMF, based on a formula, there is a formula that they use, and that is not required for UPSC. For example, many of you will ask me, sir, what is the formula? Formula goes like this: GDP into 0.5 plus openness into zero point 0.3 plus, right, variability into 0.15, and finally plus the reserves into 0.05. This is the formula. In fact, it is not over. They will close the bracket like this, and at the top of the bracket they will write CF, compression factor. Now please do let me know, do you think UPSC will ask you this formula? Please do let me know now. Do you think UPSC will ask you this kind of a formula? For example, right, I gave you formula for NER, nominal effective exchange rate. I gave you one more formula for RER, real effective exchange rate, your favorite integration I introduced in economics. So UPSC will not ask you this formula. But is it okay if I say, for all these right countries, whoever wants to become a member country or whoever want to be part of IMF, right, IMF will take all these factors. Now you'll ask me, sir, what is variability? Not needed for UPSC. You'll ask me, what is openness? Not at all required. Again, within this also there are various factors that they will use to find out how much is openness, how much is variability, etc. You don't need to worry. Simply remember there are four factors. This is where the by hearting, right, badam, right, your power of badam eating will come. You simply need to buy it. Highest weightage has been given to GDP 0.5, and apart from GDP, the other three parameters are openness, variability, as well as reserves. And just to make it easier for you people, I've arranged them in descending order. I've made the arrangement in descending order. Simply by heart them. So IMF, whenever a country wants to become a member, or even the member countries, they will use these parameters to calculate quota. For example, India's quota, as per the latest data published by IMF, it is 2.75%, which means India's position in the global market is of 2.75%. And based on this quota, India will have to make certain contribution to the International Monetary Fund. Is this okay with all of you? Right? Is this okay? Quota is nothing but how much is the relative position of India in the global market. And as per the calculation, it is 2.75%. India will have to make contribution to IMF. So the first source of funding for IMF will be the quota system. Second source of funding. Now, what if the amount of money that is collected by IMF under quota, they've used all the money to give loans, they require more money now? Yes or no? I hope you understand. In all of this, right, let's say they have taken money from all the member countries under quota. What if they exhaust all of this money? Does IMF simply say, henceforth, if any other country wants to borrow, I don't have money? Can IMF do that? IMF cannot do that because they need to ensure that the countries will not face and basically crumble under the BOP crisis. And that is a precise reason. There are two more sources. I repeat, there are two more sources from where IMF will get the money from the member countries. That is called as a multilateral borrowing and a bilateral borrowing agreement. And please have a look at this. If you put together all the three, sources, that is quota, multilateral and bilateral, can I simply say IMF has somewhere around $1 trillion I'm rounding off the number. Please do let me know. IMF has somewhere around $1 trillion, which, right, in form of resources, which they can utilize to provide loans to member countries like this. Around $1 trillion. Now, what is this multilateral and bilateral borrowing? I've given the explanation here. Simply have a look at it. Let me explain it. Okay, right. So, new arrangements to borrow and 2020 bilateral borrowing agreement. Now, many of you simply say, sir, earlier you told multilateral, but you are writing something that is a new arrangement to borrow. New arrangement to borrow is nothing but multilateral borrowing. Okay. So, first one is the new arrangements to borrow, NAB, and second one is right, the 2020 bilateral borrowing agreement. Now, what are the important points? There are 40 participants in the NAB. I'll use the short forms now. In NAB, there are 40 participants. Is India part of it? Of course, India is part of both of them. India is part of NAB also as well as right, bilateral borrowing agreement also. Now, what is the role of NAB? These 40 participants in the IMF, they have an agreement with the IMF. And they say, if IMF requires money for its activities, then all of us put together, we are willing to provide $521 billion. Very simple idea, right? All of us put together, right? We will vote. 85% of our voting is in favor of it. Then we will collectively give you how much amount of money? $521 billion. This is basically called as a new arrangement to borrow. Any difficulty in NAB, please do let me know. Otherwise, I'll go to the bilateral borrowing agreement. Can I go to the bilateral borrowing agreement? And again, I'll repeat it. Don't make it complicated. What is the concept here? 40 countries have come together, and all the 40 countries put together, if IMF requires money, then they are willing to give how much amount of money? $521 billion collectively to IMF. That is called as a new arrangement to borrow. Now, what about bilateral borrowing agreement? Is India part of it? I'll repeat it. I've already answered it. Yes, India is part of both of it. So, what is bilateral borrowing agreement? One more, right? There is one more agreement with IMF where, right, have a look at this. Collectively, right, 40 creditors, 40 lenders, that is basically member countries. They say, if you want, I will give you $193 billion. There's a term SDR here. I'll discuss SDR. Have patience. Right? The collective amount that they will be willing to lend to IMF will be $193 billion. Again, concept is same. I'll give a very simple example. Right? I'll give you a very much relative example to all of you. When you have a salary, don't you think in, let's say, in one or the other year, the expenditure will be more than your salary? In that case, will you not borrow from your, let's say, parents? Let me know. Will you not borrow from your friends? Will you not borrow from bank? Apply the same logic here. Apply the same logic. Here also IMF has certain amount of money, but if they want, there is one arrangement with, right, some of the current countries where these countries can collectively provide $520 plus billion to IMF. And second, NAB is there. There is one more. I'm sorry, the BBA is there, wherein again, right, some creditors are there. They collectively are saying to the IMF, we will give you 193 billion worth of dollar for loans. That is basically the bilateral borrowing agreement as well as a multilateral borrowing agreement, MBA and BBA. Okay. So can we separately say, and how much is India share? Again, don't waste your time. If you ask me, this is irrelevant for UPSC. Do you want to know how much is India share in all these agreements, all these arrangements? Why? I can give you the data, and you can easily get the data from IMF website also. But if you ask me, don't waste your time. UPSC is never going to ask you those kind of questions. And some of you might simply say, what if they ask? Just as usual, there'll be some students who will simply say, what if they ask? Then my dear, right, that will be classified as, right, basically the most difficult question because it is very much factual from some remote area from IMF website, they have taken it. Okay, done? Okay. So that is basically the source of funds. Any difficulty in source of funds? Is India part of both of them? Yes. Why one is multi and another is bi? My dear, that is how the names have been given to agreements. Don't worry. Don't worry. Right? That is basically the names have been given. Okay. What is the profit for the country? Interest. Right? There is interest paid on this. How interest will be calculated? Why? Why? Interest is paid. India earns interest. Right? Trust me, interest is paid. There is some methodology for calculation. There is SDRI. Again, not useful. SDRI is there. Interest is paid. Don't waste your time in all of this. Okay, done. So this is the source of funding for IMF. Next, right? IMF will provide loans. Right? I'll come back to this. Don't worry. IMF will provide loans to member countries. In what way IMF will provide loans? Always remember this. Before taking an actual loan from IMF, there is one facility that is available with IMF, that is a reserve tranche. Reserve tranche, this is also referred to as gold tranche. Right? This is a reserve tranche or a gold tranche. Now, if you remember it very carefully, when I discuss the concept of forex reserves under Reserve Bank of India, forex reserves. In the forex reserves, there are four components. Yes or no? In the forex reserves held by India, there are four components. What are the four components? One is a foreign currency asset. Second one was basically gold. Third one was STR, special drawing rights. We'll discuss in some time. And the fourth one was reserve tranche and gold tranche. In fact, this I've taken from this year's economic survey. Do you need to by heart it? Absolutely no. Don't waste your time. Do not by heart this table. But can you just make an observation here? This table will give you the total of forex reserves held in India, and the forex reserves are basically given under four headings or four components are there. One is a gold, second one is RTP. Before you start typing what is RTP, reserve tranche position. RTP simply stands for reserve tranche position. RTP at IMF, they will say reserve tranche position at IMF. Okay, so RTP. Third one is a STR, special drawing rights, we'll discuss. And the fourth one is foreign currency asset. And the forex reserves as a sum total of all of this is given in the last column. Please observe, but do not by heart anything. Don't waste your time. Do not by heart anything here. Now, what is this reserve tranche? What is the concept of a reserve tranche? Now, let's say hypothetically, there is a country X. Okay, there is a country X, and the IMF has calculated the quota of country X as a, let's say, I'll take a simple number, $100 billion. Simple so that you understand. Right, so IMF using a formula has calculated a quota of country X, that is $100 billion, which means country X has given the quota amount to the International Monetary Fund. Now, what if X requires money? If the country X is in a crisis or they are facing certain crisis, they require certain amount of money. In that case, in that situation, even before taking the loan, the country X can use a facility with the International Monetary Fund, which is called as a reserve tranche position. And this reserve tranche position in simple is nothing but up to 25% of the quota. I'll repeat the condition here. Up to 25% of the quota the country can take from IMF without meeting any condition, without accepting any of the charges of IMF. What do you mean by this? Let me explain this. Understand this very carefully. Whenever IMF will provide loans, I've told you this earlier also, IMF will impose certain conditions. Does it make sense to you or not? Right, for example, IMF will provide loans to Sri Lanka. IMF will provide loans to Pakistan. Do you think IMF should provide the loans without imposing any conditions? Of course, no. IMF has to impose conditions. Of course, there's a criticism regarding that. But IMF says a country which is already there in the crisis, without any conditions, I cannot give the loans. What if I give a loan to the country and they will misuse the loan? Right, the country will take the loan from IMF, use the money to provide subsidies to the people. use the money to incur, right, let's say wasteful expenditure. In that case, I've given a loan, but the loan is being misused. What if the crisis will much further deepen, etc.? That is the precise reason why whenever IMF will provide the loan like this, right, they will basically impose a certain condition, but that is applicable to loans. And under the reserve tranche position, please have a look at it. The member country is allowed to take up to 25% of its quota from IMF without meeting any condition, without paying any charges to IMF. Is it okay? Right, that is in this example, if country X wants to take the money under the reserve tranche position, up to 25% of the quota, that is up to $25 billion, they can simply take it from IMF. They don't have to pay any charges to the IMF for this, and they do not have to fulfill any of the conditions of the IMF. Right, that is called as a reserve tranche position. Any difficulty, please do let me know. Now, please look at the first point. It is the difference between IMF holdings of a country and the designated IMF quota of the country. This is a definition given in the IMF website. Many of you will get confused. What is the meaning of this definition? Let me put it in numbers. If country X will take, let's say, 25% of the quota from IMF, how much will be the holdings? That is, from the quota, actual how much money will be there with IMF now? Can I simply say IMF, right, will be holding $75 billion of country X? Let me know. 75 billion actual contribution, actual quota is how much? 100 billion. If country X will take 25 billion from IMF, actual holding will be how much? Actual holding will be $75 billion. Now, can I simply say quota is nothing but the difference between the reserve tranche position. My mistake, I'll repeat it. RTP is nothing but the difference between the holdings of the country with IMF and the quota decided by IMF. Any difficulty with the definition, please do let me know. I'll repeat it again. Right, RTP is nothing but the difference between IMF holding of a member country and the quota that is decided. Holding means what? Whatever quota you have contributed, out of this, how much money you have taken. And under the RTP, you are allowed to take up to 25% of your quota, which means if your holding is actual quota is 100 billion, if you take 25% of it, that will become $25 billion. Now you're holding with IMF. The money that is, right, actual money that is there with IMF from your side will be $75 billion. So the difference between the quota and holding is nothing but the reserve tranche position, RTP. Every member country needs to contribute their share in terms of quotas to IMF. Part of this can be withdrawn by the member countries. And how much is allowed? Up to 25% is allowed. And whenever the member countries will take this, they are not supposed to pay any charges nor abide by any conditions of IMF. This is called as a reserve tranche position. Any difficulty? For example, if you ask me, sir, how much is the quota for India? How much is the quota for India? You can check in the website later. As per IMF website, India's quota at IMF is somewhere around 13,114 SDRs. Right? Million SDRs. 13,114 million SDR. Now, many of you will start asking me, what is this SDR? I'll discuss SDR now. But before that, any difficulty here? Let me know. Any difficulty? Right? That is basically the idea. Last point, my dear. If you take a loan from IMF, IMF will impose certain conditions. For example, you will have to reduce your expenditure by this much. You will have to reduce your fiscal deficit by this much. You will have to reduce import duties by this much, etc., etc. That is when you take a loan from IMF. But when you take or when you avail the facility of reserve tranche position, you will not pay any money, any charges to IMF, and you will not basically you will not basically follow any of the conditions of IMF. That is meaning of the last point. Okay. Now, what is this STR? Right? Why? What is this concept of STR? STR first and foremost stands for special drawing right. Right? STR stands for special drawing right. Now, what is this concept of special drawing right? Let me explain this. IMF has issued certain type of reserve assets. I repeat, IMF has issued certain types of reserve assets, just like currencies, to all the member countries. Is it okay? I'll repeat the point here again. Understand this. IMF has issued a certain currency reserve asset to all the member countries who are part of IMF, and this reserve asset which has been issued by IMF is called as special drawing right. And what is the use of this special drawing right? IMF says if you have taken a loan from me, you can pay it in terms of STR. Imagine you have 10 STRs, you want dollars. You can convert these STRs by giving it to another country and collect a dollar from them, etc. Is the point okay with you? Let me know. What is this idea of STR? Imagine you have taken money, loan from IMF. You have taken a loan. You want to repay the loan. You can use these STRs to repay your existing loan to IMF. Sir, what if I don't have any loan with IMF? Then, my dear, you don't have to be worried. You require dollars. You can sell these STRs to another country and you can get dollars in return from the other country. That is the utility of special drawing rights which are issued by IMF back in 1969. Can I go forward? STRs can be converted into currencies. Many currencies can be bought using STRs. But please understand, STRs can be held only by the member countries of IMF. They can be sold, they can be transferred to other member countries of IMF. Individuals are not allowed to hold STRs. Companies are not allowed to hold STRs. Mr. Elon Musk, though he might be one of the richest person in the world, he cannot purchase STRs. I cannot purchase STRs. You cannot purchase STRs. Right? That is basically the concept of STR. So every member country, based on the quota, certain amount of STRs will be allocated to every member country. And please understand this, the board of governors, I repeat, a board of governors, once every 5 years, again that is not compulsory for them, once every 5 years can review what is the STR allocation to member countries. They can revise, they can allocate more STRs to the member countries, but the decision has to be done only by the board of governors of IMF. Done? And what is the value of STR? What is the value of 1 unit of STR? For example, let's say India holds a certain amount of STR. How can we convert this into dollars? What is the value of 1 unit of STR? Again, that is decided by International Monetary Fund. And to decide the value of STR, generally there is a mix of currencies. I'll repeat it. There is a mix of currency. There is a basket of currency used by IMF. And the basket of currency consists of all these currencies. Right? You have a US dollar, you have euro, you have a Chinese yuan, you have Japanese yen, you also have pound sterling. So these are the 5 currencies. My recommendation, by heart this table, at least the first 2 columns of it. Is it okay? Let me know. My recommendation to all of you is simply by heart this table, at least the first 2 columns. You do not have to be worried about the last column because that will keep on changing. At least the first 2 columns you should by heart, because questions have been asked, questions will be asked by UPSC in this particular area. Highest weightage has been given to the US dollar. The lowest weightage has been given to pound sterling of around 8% and 41%. Now, who will purchase this STR? Many of you are asking, who will purchase this STR? Again, when I say STR, do not imagine these are in the form of currency notes or coins. Absolutely no. Do not imagine like STR will be in the form of, let's say, 500 rupee note or recently withdrawn 2000 rupee note. No, do not imagine that. When you imagine that, that is where you will start asking me a question like, sir, where will they print STR? How many STRs they will print? No printing, nothing. Everything is online. Right? So these are nothing but reserve assets based on the quota of member country. IMF will allocate these STRs to the member countries. For example, let's say India, the amount of dollars that are available in India have exhausted. I'll give a very simple example. Amount of the dollars which are there in India have been exhausted. You do not have any more dollar. RBI has used all the dollars that they have in the forex reserves. Now you require dollars. All of you will agree? You will require dollars. From where can you get the dollars? One way is you have STRs. You can take the STRs, sell it to another country, and let's say today, hypothetically, just hypothetical number. Let's say today, for 1 unit of STR, you will get, let's say, $5. Although it is much, much lower than this, don't worry about it. Imagine for 1 unit of STR, the value that is decided by IMF is $5, which means the other country that will purchase STR from you, they will have to pay for every 1 unit of STR, they will have to give you $5. In fact, IMF pays interest on the STRs. STRs are a component of a forex reserves. These can be used for making repayment of loans to IMF. These can also be traded, can be sold to other countries through IMF, right, in order to get other currencies from IMF. Any doubts here? Any doubts? And those are asking, sir, why rupee is not there in the list? My dear, again and again, we have been discussing this. Is rupee an international currency? Don't keep on asking the same question every time. Is rupee an international currency? Right? Do you think rupee is used to trade, to settle transactions in the international market? Hardly 2%. Hardly 2% of the settlement in the international market is done through rupees. Right? That is the precise reason why rupee is not considered in majority of these kinds of, right, let's say, listings as such. Okay, so value of 1 unit of STR is based on basket of currencies. IMF will allocate STRs in proportion of quotas that is held by, or quotas that is decided for every member country. Done? Now please do let me know any issue with the STR as well as right, the concept of reserve tranche position, so that I can go to the concept of lending by IMF. Can India pay to USA in the form of STR in government to government agreements? They can use it, but generally what happens is, whenever India has taken a loan from USA, they generally convert those and make a payment. But in case of IMF, whenever you talk about IMF, International Monetary Fund, if you remember earlier also, everything that IMF is doing, it is always translated in terms of units of STR. Again, you can use right, the conversion rate, and that is 1 STR is equal to how many dollars. You can convert everything into dollars also. But IMF, because it is the currency of IMF, it's very simple. It is the currency or the asset issued by IMF. Everything that IMF does will generally be provided in the form of STRs. When the country joins IMF, country's GDP might be less, and on the basis of that, quota will be set after years country grows and develops. I did not say that quota review is also done by IMF Board of Governors. Please have a look at this. In fact, it is there in the slide. It is there in the slide. The right to approve quota increases. It is there right in front of your eyes. We have discussed this. Please do not have any confusion. Quotas can be reviewed, right? And that is the role of Board of Governors. SDR allocation can be reviewed. Again, that is the role of Board of Governors. Okay. Okay, so let me go forward. Can rupee become an international currency? No, not likely in near time. Before you jump and simply say, sir, you're criticizing India, etc., etc., I don't think so that India will become an international currency in a near term. Maybe in the medium term or a long term, definitely yes. We are moving towards that. Because if you want to become an international currency, if you basically go look at the international trade chapter, there is certain issues in the BOP. Yes or no? In case of capital account, do we have full capital account convertibility? We have discussed this. Do we have full capital account convertibility? The answer is no. We do not have full capital account convertibility. And if you basically become an international currency, the control that RBI has on the monetary policy will be lost. Right? It becomes very, very difficult to control the monetary policy in India with let's say an international currency, with rupee being an international currency. Because when rupee will become an international currency, free flow will take place. Rupee can come into India, rupee can go out of India, and RBI should be willing to provide sufficient amount of rupees in the international market. I hope you understand this. When you say rupee will it become an international currency, it simply means, for example, we are holding in forex reserves, we are holding dollars. In the same way, right? Let's say in the same way, right? USA will start holding rupees in their forex reserves. Right now, they are holding dollars. If India's rupee becomes an international currency, they will start holding rupees in their let's say reserves. Then don't you think India should be in a position to print and supply more and more rupees to the market? And that basically creates a huge problem in terms of having monetary policy. Independent monetary policy will become very, very difficult at that point of time. Done? Okay. So next, lending. Right? We have discussed from what sources IMF will get money. Now, how IMF will give loan. I've given a table here. There are more than 10 types of loans which are given by IMF. I repeat, there are more than 10 types of loans which are given by IMF. Do you need to buy heart everything for UPSC? If you ask me, not required. I've just given you certain types here. 6 types of loan products, loan arrangements which are available with IMF. For example, rapid credit facility, right? Standby credit facility, extended credit facility, rapid financing instrument, standby arrangement, extended fund facility. Now, why I've given in 2 columns like this? Please understand. I've given in 2 columns for a very simple reason. Some of these loan arrangements are concessional in nature. Some of them are not concessional in nature. What do you mean by concessional and non-concessional? I'll give a very simple example. Imagine a country such as Nigeria will take a loan from IMF and USA will take a loan from IMF. Both are taking loans from International Monetary Fund. Please tell me, is it fair to charge a rate of interest on both the loans here? Let me know. You tell me. Right? Is it fair for IMF to charge a rate of interest on both the loans? Right? Of course, no. Some of you are saying yes. No. IMF should not be charging loans on rates on both of the loans. Why? USA's size of GDP is much, much bigger. The capacity of repayment by USA is also much, much higher. Whereas one of the very, very poor countries in the international market is basically Nigeria. Now, don't you think what is fair is IMF will provide loan to Nigeria and says don't pay any interest, no interest payment. Don't pay any interest. Whereas IMF will give a loan to the USA and will impose a certain interest on it. That is basically a concept of concessional and non-concessional. I hope you understand this. Can I call this a loan as a concessional loan and this loan as non-concessional loan? Let me know. Can I call this loan given to Nigeria as a concessional loan because no interest, zero interest payment? And on the other hand, the loan that is given to the USA as a concessional loan. That's basically the concept of concessional and non-concessional. Concessional loans, these agreements, right? These agreements are available only for very poor countries. These are available to the least developed countries, right? Where rate of interest is not applicable, they are allowed to take loans under concessional arrangement. Whereas non-concessional, it is available for all the countries. But condition is rate of interest will be applicable in case of non-concessional loans. For example, has India taken loans in the past? I've already answered this question. Yes, back in the past, India has taken loans from the International Monetary Fund. Now, what kind of loans have been taken by India? India has mainly taken the loans under standby arrangement. Please remember this. It has taken loans under the standby arrangement as well as it has taken loans under the extended fund facility. Under the extended fund facility. So generally, under these 2 types of loan arrangements, International Monetary Fund has given loan facility to the Indian government. For other governments, you don't have to be worried. For various other governments, different types of loan arrangements have been provided. But generally, this is a concept of concessional as well as non-concessional. Now, many of you started typing, sir, what will be there under RCF, etc., etc. Just to make it much more complicated, I will give you one more table, right? In case of a standby agreement, repayment is done in 3.25 years to 5 years. In case of extended fund facility, repayment period is up to 3 years, right? In case of a rapid financing instrument, repayment is done in 3.25 years to 5 years. And please understand, from one country to another country, how these agreements are signed, how much a loan will be provided, in how many, right, installments a loan will be provided, what will be the rate of interest, etc. Based on country to country, there is a variation. And right, if you ask me, sir, right, you have written the repayment in 3.25 years to 5 years, what is the exact number? There is no exact number. For some of the countries, it will be given for 4 years. For some of the countries, it will be given for 5 years. And again, there's a grace period even after that. Another grace period of 2 years, another grace period of 3 years, etc., etc. Which means, again, the point I'm trying to make here is very simple. There is no uniform formula for all these loan agreements. Is it okay? Right? There is no unified formula. You cannot simply say, okay, exactly 4 years. Absolutely no. Extension can be provided. You cannot simply say exactly 3.25 years. No, from one country to another country, the loan agreements will keep on changing. Done? So this is right, basically one more piece of information that I've given to you. If you ask me, try to glance through it and try to look at those instruments which have been used by IMF in recent times. Done? Right? So this is how loans are provided by IMF, right, under the RTP, under the concessional as well as a non-concessional lending done by International Monetary Fund. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, more than sufficient from IMF. Certain points in connection to the India as well as IMF. India is one of the founding members of IMF. Founding members means what? When IMF was established, India is one of the members. India is currently having a voting right of 2.63%. India's quota is 2.75%. The quota in terms of STRs is around 13,114 million STRs, but the voting right is 2.63%. India has not taken any financial assistance from IMF since 1993. They have not taken any assistance from IMF post 1993. Right? And the reason is very simple. Post 1991, we have implemented LPG reforms. And don't you think, post 1991, various policy measures have been taken by Government of India plus RBI to boost forex reserves. Today, India has a forex reserves of $500 billion, $600 billion, $640 billion, which means, right, we, even if there is a crisis in the forex market, that is the exchange rate market, we have sufficient forex reserves to take care of the crisis. That is the reason post 1990s, we have not taken loans from IMF. The last time the loan arrangement was provided for 91 to 93. After that, no loans have been taken and the loans have been repaid by, right, the Indian government to the IMF. Done. So this is the discussion regarding IMF. Now, before I go forward and solve the questions, any question that you have, any doubts that you have, please do let me know. Hard loans or soft loans? My dear, the concept of hard loans and soft loans do not come in the concept of IMF. It will generally come when multiple countries are signing agreements. Hard loan means whenever repayment. Again, I'll tell you, sir, I read somewhere that IMF will provide soft loans. Of course, yes. What is the meaning of hard loan and soft loan? Soft loan means repayment conditions are very much easy, very much flexible. For example, can I give you a current affairs example? India has taken a loan from Japan to develop one of the infrastructure projects in India. And the name of the infrastructure project is basically Bullet Train Project. And the rate of interest that Japan is charging on such a huge amount of loan is very, very less than 1%. And the repayment period that has been decided by Japanese government is more than 50 years. So 50-year loan, rate of interest is less than 1%, right? That will be a very soft loan. So generally soft loan means, right, the repayment conditions are very much flexible, right? They will not impose any stress on a government. That is a concept of a soft loan. Are there any issues with IMF? Of course, yes, right? There are issues with IMF. Even if IMF is functioning, are there no allegations of China manipulating its currency? Let me know. right? Are there no concerns regarding China manipulating its currency? Of course, yes, there are certain concerns. Second, I said, whenever IMF will provide loans, they will impose conditions, right? In a country where the economic crisis is already there, where there is so much of economic crisis, IMF will force the member country to impose conditions, right? For example, higher taxes, right? If I take a current affairs example, in Sri Lanka, the taxes and the prices of power, petrol has increased. In Pakistan, the taxes imposed on petrol has increased. Now imagine a situation where the country's economy is already in crisis. The government, in order to shore up, in order to increase the amount of taxes collected, they are imposing more and more taxes on the people. Will it not increase a hardship on the people? Will it not increase the burden on the people? Of course, the answer is yes. So that's the reason I said there's a criticism also. The criticism is that the country is already in crisis. And because of conditions, the hardship on the people is further increasing. Right? Of course, yes, there's a criticism for that. And the third is basically the dominance by developed countries. Dominance of developed countries. Because whenever the IMF has to take decisions, generally certain voting has to be done. Right? If you remember 85%, 85%, in many of the slides I've written 85%. In some of the very important decisions, you require 85% voting. And USA has a huge right value of voting, more than 16%. Whereas India has a voting right of around 2.63%, which means USA effectively has veto power in the IMF. And that is basically the argument. Okay, done. Does the amount of quota is submitted by the country to IMF, or its estimate of position only needs to be same amount in IMF? Quota has to be submitted, and right return they can take up to 25%. Sir, is this one-time payment, or members have to provide quota periodically? Periodically, the quotas can be revised. FAME 1, FAME 2 means FAME is an initiative of Government of India to promote production of electric vehicles. FAME basically stands for faster adoption and manufacturing of electric vehicles. Right? Under this, Government of India is providing certain incentives or subsidies, basically to promote a production of electric vehicles. It could be two-wheeler, it could be three-wheeler, it could be four-wheeler, it could be electric buses, etc., etc. That is FAME 1 as well as FAME 2 initiative. Okay, done. Will IMF release reports on private companies? No. Generally, IMF is not involved in operation of private sector. It is focused on government policies. Okay, done. So let's solve the questions now. Let's solve the questions. Look at the question number 1. Rather than starting, right, let's say the poll, etc., it's a straightforward question. Right, so recently, which one of the following currencies has been proposed to be added to the basket of IMF's ESTR? The most recent addition that has happened to the basket of ESTR is renminbi, Chinese yuan, or renminbi. Right, so this is the right option is option D, that is a renminbi. Rather than using right the Chinese yuan, they will use the term, right, another name for that is the renminbi. Just like in India we have a rupee paisa like this. So in case of China, there are two names used. One is a Chinese yuan, second one is a renminbi. Done. Next, this was asked last year. Okay, here also some of you are making mistake. 90% have answered correctly. Rapid financing instrument, rapid credit facility, RFI and RCF are related to the provisions of lending by which of the following? Some are saying United Nations. How, my dear? Option B is the right one. International Monetary Fund. IMF is the right one. Okay. Okay. Let's start. With reference to IMFC, consider the following statements. IMFC discusses matters of concern affecting global economy and advises International Monetary Fund on direction of its work. Statement 1 is correct. World Bank participates as an observer in IMFC meetings. Many of you have marked it wrong, right? Despite me saying it orally, many of you basically would have gone through, right, or have seen the slide I've written. The World Bank only on the side of, right, the development committee. Based on that, you might have decided, okay, right, second statement is wrong. But if you have listened to the lecture, I've told you very clearly. World Bank, or for that matter, many of these international agencies will participate in IMFC meetings also, in development committee meetings also, but they will participate as observers, just right to make certain recommendations, to provide certain inputs, etc. Okay, so both the statements are correct. Right option is option C, both 1 and 2. Okay, descriptive questions. The nature of economic growth in India in recent times is often described as jobless growth. Do you agree with this view? Give arguments in favor of your answer. Right, last week, then when we discussed the idea of employment, I used a concept called as a jobless growth. We have discussed the idea of a jobless growth, right? There is a slide on that, you can have a look at it. Now, what is the model answer? Right, what's the basic model answer? Introduction, main body, and conclusion. And many of you are asking me, sir, do we write the term introduction in the mains paper? Please don't write it. Just to make it clearer for you, I'm trying to say that there are three components, there are three parts to the answer, right? So one is introduction, second one is main body, and the third one is conclusion. And why I'm writing it, just to show you that, okay, you also need to structure your answer. I hope you understand. You also need to structure your answer. For example, is it okay if I write this statement in the beginning? Let me know. Is it okay if I write this? Forget it is written conclusion here. Can I write this statement in the beginning? No, it doesn't make any sense. Can I write this? That is, what is the definition of jobless growth? Can I write it at the end of the answer? No, that is not the right structuring for your answer. So what you need to do is basically structure your answer, and that's the reason I write what you should write in introduction, what you should be writing in the main body, and what should be your conclusion. And always remember this, I've kept on telling this every time that I've discussed the questions. Always conclude on a positive note, right? Say something way forward, right? Give something about, let's say, a committee recommendation, right? Do or give certain, right, let's say, policy recommendations to the government. Do not end up in a negative note. Never end your answer on a negative note. What do you mean by negative note here? Is there jobless growth in India? Yes, you know that there's a jobless growth in India. Can you simply write your conclusion as, because there is a jobless growth in India, there is no point in government of India implementing any policies because most of the policies are facing hurdles, facing implementation issues, etc. Can you conclude your answer by saying this? Absolutely no. You want to become a civil servant, right? What should be the solution? Please give a solution to the problem then. Right, so explain what is jobless growth, give the definition of jobless growth, what will be there in the main body, why is there a jobless growth phenomenon observed in India, did we discuss factors why we say there's a jobless growth, capital intensive investment, employment elasticity is very low, skilled labor availability is very low, etc, etc. Right, so you know what are the factors why we say there's a jobless growth. Please write about it, and finally conclude, right? Give a conclusion. However, the government has been taking various measures such as Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, Make in India initiative, etc., in order to promote skilled labor availability and also create more and more labor opportunities in the market. That is basically the conclusion that you need to provide. Okay, so just practice. You will not get it immediately. My recommendation is practice, practice, practice. Second, what are the salient features of inclusive growth? Has India been experiencing such a growth process? Analyze and suggest measures for inclusive growth. Three questions within one question. Three questions. What are the salient features of inclusive growth? Has India been experiencing inclusive growth? Analyze and suggest measures for the promotion of inclusive growth. Right? Introduction, give a definition of inclusive growth. What should be there in the main body? What are the salient features of inclusive growth? What do you mean by salient features? Right? Increasing employment generation, reduction in income disparities, reduction in wealth disparities, promotion of industrialization, right? Protection of the environment, etc., etc. These are nothing but salient features of inclusive growth, right? Has India been experiencing inclusive growth despite government of India implementing various measures? For example, it was one of the central themes in the 11th 5-year plan and the 12th 5-year plan. Poverty numbers in case of India is very, very high even today. Regional disparities are very high. Income disparities are existing. Wealth disparities are also existing. So government of India have taken various reforms, but there is a need to implement more reforms to address all of these. Right, that is way forward will be government has to promote employment generation, government has to implement skilling, education, protection of environment reforms, etc. Effectively, these reforms have to be implemented. Done. So this is basically how you approach the answer to these kind of questions. Some of you are worried about word limit. My recommendation to you people is don't worry about word limit. Why? The question can be asked for 150 words. Question can be asked for 250 words as well. But if you know how to write, you can ensure that whatever information you want to communicate to the evaluator, you can communicate it effectively within 150 words also and within 250 words also. Right? That should be the practice. That should be the practice that you need to make. Okay. So I believe this question we have already discussed. FDI, right? Investment models. We have already discussed this FDI question. Special economic zones also we have discussed. Done then. So next is mind map. I've already given the mind map to you people in the last class itself, right? I've told you, please prepare mind maps like this, right? And practice it. Practice. More you practice, more you revise, economics or the Indian economy will become more easier for you over a period of time. Done. So with this, let me wind up the discussion for you people with respect to the discussion that we had planned for all the 20 plus models, right? The 20 plus models that we have planned from day one, right? Or in the first class itself, I've given you the syllabus that I would be covering. I've covered every part of whatever was there in the slide. In fact, we have covered more and more current affairs in addition to what was given in the slide. Done. So if you have any questions, please do let me know. Otherwise, we'll simply close the discussion for today. Any other questions that you people have? Can you repeat the first and second issues regarding IMF? First, again, I don't know what was the sequence, but I'll tell you the issues or the criticism. First criticism is basically the IMF, despite having an authority such as IMF, where one of the functions is to ensure that exchange rates, right? There is no influence of the governments in the exchange rate. Again and again, there's a criticism that Chinese government is manipulating its currency, right? So that is basically one criticism. IMF is not able to control these kind of events. Second one that I told you was in countries where there's a crisis, IMF will provide loan, but with certain conditions, right? They will ask them to increase increase the taxes, reduce expenditure, etc., etc. Right? So the argument is in a country where there is already crisis, the IMF is imposing conditions. As a result of this, the charges on petrol is increased, the taxes on fuel is increased, The charges on, right, let's say power is increased by the government in order to shore up more revenues. So argument is there is a crisis, you are increasing the burden on the poor people again. Right. And the third one I said, whenever you talk about IMF decision making, there's a voting right there. USA, right, has more than 15%, India has somewhere around 2.63%, which means if 85% is required, that is voting is required, effectively USA will have the veto power, right? So the developed countries, right, because they have large voting power, they will try to control, right, the decision making in the IMF. Done. Okay. So these are some of the concerns that I had raised or criticisms that I had raised in regards to the functioning of IMF. Okay. Anything else? Is this the last class of economics? Yes. For the evening batch, this is the last class for economics. What is NER? Right? NER is nominal exchange rate. Arey Baba. International trade. Please go back to the international trade PPT. No? RER, NER, everything is given there. Okay, anything else? How to revise economics? My dear, in every class I have told you, or at least weekly once I have told you, please keep on reading static source. Right, one static book is more than sufficient. In addition to that, update current affairs. I'll keep on hammering on this point. Keep on reading current affairs. Trust me, if you look at right the questions which have been asked by UPSC, they will be targeting current affairs. No doubt you should know static information. No doubt, I'm not discounting static information. But the usefulness of static information, right, in UPSC exam is when you have updated current affairs. So please read the PPTs, make mind maps, update current affairs, keep on revising current affairs or updating and revising the notes that you have made. Okay, done. My target is 2025 from when I start preparation for optional. That you will have to decide, my dear. I don't know whether you're working, not working, etc. I don't have any clue. Based on your right, let's say strategy, you do that. Okay. How many years PYQ we must solve? At least 5 years. At least 5 years. My recommendation is solve PYQs of at least the last 5 years. Okay. Economics optional. Right. I've addressed this in the past also. I'll repeat it again. Point number one. This is my advice to you. My advice. Point number one. Your background should be from economics. Sir, right, in class 11th, I studied economics. There was a part of economics. Absolute no. Absolute no from my side. Right? Why? If you look at the economic syllabus, that was the point number two. Please look at the economic syllabus. Optionals, by the way. Those who are not taking economics optionals, leave it. It is not at all concerning you. If you look at the syllabus, there are two papers, paper 1 and paper 2. Paper 2, you will feel this is very easy because whatever you have studied in the GS paper 3, it is an extension of that. Simple. It is basically, let's say you have studied GS paper 3, right? Improve the preparation by another 30%. You will basically take care of paper 2. That is optional paper 2 for economics. But please look at optional 1, paper 1, paper 1. That is very, very critical, very, very important. Why? Everything is technical. Everything is simply technical in nature. Technical in the sense, purely it is economics. Purely that is economics. Economics as a subject you will have to study. Right? That's the reason my concern with the students is always about paper 1 in optional economics, not paper 2. If you are able to solve the last 5 years question paper, that is a third point to you. Last 5 year papers with paper 1, that is paper 1 last 5 years questions, then I would simply say you are good to go. Please take up economics optional. And point number 4, very, very critical, very important. As far as I know, there are no good sources or the coaching institutions which will provide you economics optional coaching. Right? Economics optional coaching, there are no good institutions. Do not waste your money. Do not run behind. And if you read the testimonials of the toppers who have taken economics optionals, I'm pretty sure you will come across one point. All of them will tell you, I did self-study. Is it okay? Right. So these are the 5 points. right? If you're okay with all the 5 points, then take up economics optional. Otherwise, pick up anything else, any other scoring subject. Any recommendations for choosing optionals? Right? I generally tell the students 2 points. 2 points. Again, it's an advice. It's a recommendation, just like 15th Finance Commission giving it to Government of India. You are the Government of India, take it or leave it. One, the subject should be scoring. Of course, that is ultimately the objective. The subject should be scoring. Second one, you should be comfortable with the subject. You should be comfortable in the sense you should be able to read, remember, write model answers, or let's say write or practice the answers for that. If you're not comfortable with the subject, skip it. Do not take it as an optional because it is a high scoring. You read the interview, you heard the interview of some topper. Don't do that. Okay, done. Right. So, anything else? Anything else? Again, you're asking me about sociology optional. I hope you understand. You're asking a question about sociology optional to an economics professor or let's say economics faculty. Don't you think I'm already biased towards economics? Let me know. Am I not already biased towards economics? Right. So again, I'm not the right person to answer that question. Also, I'm not the right person because I don't want to misguide you. Rather than right misguiding, no guiding is better. Okay. Okay, done then. So take care. Right. Take care. All the best to all of you. Please read well, revise, right, and update the current affairs. Okay. So see you next time. Take care. Right. Good day.
नजर नहीं लगा पाएंगे।